I want to go further. If we enter World War III, I really think the Western media is complicit and has responsibility because of the way they've been amping up the rhetoric. And one of the ways they've been doing it is talking about nuclear war and making it somehow palatable, or like it could be limited. And I have a clip here because let's try to get a view from the Kremlin. And it's a clip from PBS. Which is interesting that they allowed a view from the Kremlin, but it's Dmitry Peskov who is, the spokesperson for Vladimir Putin. So let's hear what he has to say about nuclear war.
We turn now to the view from inside the Kremlin and an interview with President Vladimir Putin's chief spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. He's also the deputy chief of staff to Putin. Special correspondent Ryan Chilcote, who was just reporting in Russia for us for the last several weeks, spoke with Peskov this morning.
Dmitry Peskov, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Over the weekend, we heard President Biden call President Putin a butcher and say that it is impossible for him to remain in power. President Biden then said that he was not advocating for regime change. And yet you have said that the Kremlin still finds these comments alarming. Why?
Well, it's quite alarming. First of all, it's personal insult. And one can hardly imagine a place for a personal insult in rhetorics of a political leader, and especially of a political leader of the greatest country in the world, of the United States. So we're really sorry about that. And his statement about whether Putin should not or should be in power in Russia, of course, is completely unacceptable. It's not for the United States president to decide who is going to be and who is a president of the Russian Federation. It's people of Russia who are deciding during the election.
I want to ask you about nuclear weapons and clear some things up. There's still quite a bit of confusion about Russia's position. We heard yet another official over the weekend, this time former President Dmitry Medvedev, say that Russia reserves the right to use nuclear weapons if it faces an existential threat, even if the other side has not employed nuclear weapons. So could you please clarify for us what exactly would amount to an existential threat to Russia? For example, if you were unable to achieve your objectives in Ukraine, even though there's no one fighting in Russia, there's no strikes on Russia, could that be perceived as an existential threat?
Well, first of all, we have no doubt that all the objectives of our special military operation in Ukraine will be completed. We have no doubt about that. But any outcome of the operation, of course, is not a reason for usage of a nuclear weapon. We have a security concept that very clearly states that only when there is a threat for existence of the state in our country, we can use, and we will actually use, nuclear weapons to eliminate the threat for the existence of our country. Let's keep all this, let's keep these two things separate. I mean, existence of the state and special military operation in Ukraine. They have nothing to do with each other. But at the same time, if you remember the initial statement of the president when he ordered the operation on the 24th of February, there was a part of his statement warning different states not to interfere in the affairs between Ukraine and Russia during this operation. He was very strict in his warning, and he was quite tough on that. And I think that everyone understands what he meant.
But he meant that he would use nuclear weapons. He was suggesting he would use nuclear weapons if a third party got involved in the conflict?
No, I don't think so. But he was quite bold in saying that do not interfere. If you do that, we have all the possibilities to prevent that and to punish all those who are going to interfere.
Look, Mr. Peskov, if you stick to the dictionary definition of existential threat that we were discussing, Clearly nothing that is taking place or is even really, quite frankly, imaginable that could take place could reach that bar of threatening the existence of the Russian state. So why not just clear this up right now? Why can't you, on behalf of Russia, rule out the use of nuclear weapons in this conflict right here?
No one is thinking about even about the idea of using a nuclear weapon.
All right. So he said it. He said, no one is thinking about this. And notice how the reporter is like pushing him like it's Russia's idea. When it's been the US the whole lot. You know, what's your reaction to that clip?
Right. So the United States has long been threatening Russia with use of nuclear weapons. That is precisely one of the issues is as to why Russia has had tension and has had worry of the NATO expansion, because not only has NATO been expanding eastward, and not only did Ukraine violate the Minsk Accords, which were never actually something that they set up in the first place, but they have anti-ballistic missiles and they have NATO troops at their borders, which could literally escalate to something more. And of course, you add that to the no-fly zone demands by Zelensky and by a vast majority of the pro-Ukrainian contingent, politically aware of what it means, or maybe not politically aware of what it means. It essentially means World War III. So when you have many political pundits in the West and many, very high-profile politicians calling for a no-fly zone, and then these protesters that somehow happen to be supported by the State Department having these protests in DC, demanding a no-fly zone to save children and women's lives, you have the possibility of nuclear war. And that is not something that Russia is instigating. It is something that Russia is responding to based on what has been thrown at them. And why does the United States and the West have the authority to demand that everybody just give up any sort of nuclear weapon authority but them? And that's always been the case, is that they've been acting like this police of the world and in a very unipolar way. But the reality is that is obviously shifting. And we're seeing that shift, of course, with China, with Iran, with India, even with Saudi Arabia. And this is, of course, coming because of the economic issues that are tying them to Russian exports like gas and wheat and other things. And Europe, of course, is drastically being affected by that, and as is the working class of the United States. And so this is why they're gaslighting, I would say, gaslighting Russia into being the aggressor.